Hi, and welcome to another session of Public Interest Technology. This is our weekly colloquium in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. Today's colloquium is titled Co-Design or Customers Included. My name is Katina Michael, and I'm a professor, and I'm the Director of Society Policy Engineering. It's a collective in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society. And today we have two special guests, Mark Hurst, the founder of Creative Good, and Giselle Waters from Design Research in the Design Run Group. First up, we have Mark Hurst, the author of Co-Design or Customers Included, and also a podcaster, a conference organizer, and a visionary. He works in the area of user experience. Well, not exactly, although that's what Wikipedia says, but he'll tell us more about that in a moment. He's the author of Bit Literacy from 2007, and as I said, the blockbuster Customers Included, of which today's webinar will be dedicated to. So Mark, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Katina. Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mark Hurst, as Katina said, and I'm here to talk to you about co-design or customers included. And I have one audio-visual aid to show you, just one. I don't have any slides today, but this is the book that Katina was just mentioning, Customers Included. The one with the blue blaze on top is the second edition. This is the more recent edition you want to find. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories from the book and maybe a couple of stories that are not in the book to make the case that the best way of doing co-design that I found in 25 years of doing this is simply to include the customer in the process. So let me start with a story. This story is actually not in the book. Because it occurred today, just this morning. I got a phone call from a potential client who's possibly interested in working with me to help strategize and revision the user experience of an online platform they're building. And I said, well, tell me what the context is of this platform. What are you trying to do, and what have you learned so far? And they said, well, we have built it to do this, that, and the other, and the launch date is coming up just in a few weeks, and we thought it would be really good to, run a few users through the platform just to see what we can learn, for user experience purposes. And I said, so you mean you have already built the platform? And the person I was talking to said, yeah, that's right. I said, so you've built this platform and you simply want to run some users through it to see what you can learn. Yes, that's right. I said, well, can I point you to some of the very valuable low-cost automated testing services out there? Because there's not a whole lot you can do after you have built a product or a service or an app or a site. After you've built it, there's not a whole lot you could do if that's the moment you want to start learning what users actually want. And I told the person on the phone not to feel bad, because this is in fact how most technology teams work. I have been running my company, Creative Good, since 1997. So I started this company just after the birth of the web with the idea that I would help companies make websites and then later apps and platforms that were more focused on user needs, more focused on customer needs. And what I have found over how many years is that? It's 24 years, coming up on the 25th. Over 24 years, the pattern that I have seen probably more than any other in how technology is designed and built is that it is built with users and customers completely left out, completely excluded, until in some of the teams at the very last second, just before it goes live, they say, let's run a few people through this and see what we can learn. And that's a problem. And if you have any experience in the technology field, perhaps you have worked in other companies or teams or organizations, maybe you've seen the same pattern. And so you know what a problem that is to try to make any substantive changes just before launch. But I explained to my friend this morning that it reminds me of a story of the architect who very carefully and lovingly puts together designs for a custom-built house that they're building for a client. They use the digital tools to create the blueprints and the 3D drawings, and finally construction starts. And it's a beautiful 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-car garage, and for environmental concerns, they've placed solar panels on the roof. And just as the contractors are putting the finishing touches on this 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house with a 2-car garage, the architect asks the client to come over to take a look at it. And the client arrives, and the architect says, "Here is your custom-built house. I put my heart and soul into this design. My intentions are pure. I really wanted to develop and design and build the very best house for you." And the client says, "Well, I appreciate your intent, but this is the first time I have seen any evidence of the house. You have already built it. And had we talked a few months ago, I would have told you I'm single, I'm a grad student, and I wanted a 1-bedroom apartment." And scene. And that's how most technology is built today. That the architect has these brilliant ideas that comes out of his or her mind. And they use ideation boards, with whiteboards, with lots of Post-it notes and color coding. And maybe if it's a team, they bring the team in to brainstorm together and ideate what's the solution that they're going to bring about. And if someone says, "Well, we have to remember the customer, we have to," and not in the context of how Katina talks, but how I've seen this word used out in industry, we have to co-design with our customers. Do you know what, and maybe you've seen this, do you know what the ideation team very often does? They say, let's imagine what the customer might want. Okay, everyone imagine. Okay, does everyone have some imagination about what the customer wants? Let's now write those ideas on the whiteboard. And now let's have these little, I don't know if you've seen these Post-its, they're actually little colored dots. What a lot of these ideation exercises will do is they'll write all of the imaginary ideas on the whiteboard, and then to give it some semblance of inclusion of team members, they'll ask everyone to take their own little colored dots and vote on the ideas that they like the best on the whiteboard. And then they'll go through this process of sifting and sorting and prioritizing. This is the idea we like the best. And so the team has decided we're going to go for that 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-car garage house. And the key problem in that so-called co-design ideation process is that the data that they're using to infuse the design for the co-design process is fake. It's totally made up. It's imagined. And this process goes under different names, but quite often that process of imagining what fake people might want is called personas. If you have spent any time in the tech industry or in user experience or in design, you've probably heard about personas. You might have even worked on a project with personas. And I have also seen this over the years, that imagination and imagined input becomes the driving force behind designs that then become real-world products that completely flop. They totally fail because no actual user was actually included in the design process. It's all fake. So instead of customers included, which I think is the right way to conceive of co-design, it's actually customers excluded, customers ignored. Now, some people may say, well, personas have been around for a long time. Whole books have been written on personas. Don't you know that personas are a long accepted user experience process in the toolkit? And so to head off some of those concerns, for the purposes of the book, customers included, I went and I interviewed a guy named Alan Cooper. If you've been in UX long enough, you've heard of Alan Cooper. He used to run a studio called Cooper, which was later sold off. But for a number of years, he was a leading voice in user experience online. Alan Cooper is probably best known for being the inventor of personas. And I asked Alan, what do you think about personas, your baby, this method that you attached your name to as part of your legacy? Personas are being practiced all over the world. And they involve people imagining what fake people might want. And Alan Cooper said, that's not what I meant. That's not true personas. And there's a quote in the book, you can find it. It goes something like this. Alan Cooper says something to the effect of, if you didn't actually include real customers first, the persona is totally invalid. So I'm just giving you a couple of examples of how things are done wrong, such that it would lead a team to reach out at the last second and actually think that having ignored the customer through 9/10 of the development process, in the final minuscule phase, they can somehow talk to a few people and make any significant changes whatsoever. It's too late. It's too late. The house has already been designed and is being built. So my message to my friend this morning is my same message to all of you listening today. Co-design and customers included, personas, we can throw around methods all day. I can talk to you about this method, that method. Most of this is only secondary, which method you want to use. The most important thing, by far, the most important thing that I want you to walk away from my talk understanding is that you need to involve customers early, not late and not never, which is what usually happens, but early. Involve them early before you break ground on the house. Involve them early. Well, what method should we use? What questions should we ask? How many of them should there be? How do we do a screener? Those are all details. My goodness, if you can get technology teams, product teams to talk to customers before they begin embarking on the design of the thing, you will have scored a home run. This is an American baseball term. You will have scored such a titanic, that's not a good word, such an epic feat that you'll be far and away more advanced than 99% of other product teams out there. Involve the customers early, before you begin putting pen to paper. And the reason for that is it sounds so obvious. It sounds a little bit dumb even saying this. The reason you should involve them early is because you need to find out what they want before you begin building. I know this is crazy, but why would you begin building a house, a 3-bedroom house, before you understand that the client is a single grad student? Why? Why? And I reflect on this in the book a little bit. I think part of the reason why teams often do this is because they're arrogant. They think they know more than the customer. We're the smart ones. We're the disruptive ones. We are the disruptive innovators. And those poor benighted customers, they don't understand what they want. And then everyone at that point says, I remember what Steve Jobs once said. Everyone always brings up Steve Jobs. I have a whole chapter on Steve Jobs, by the way, bringing up some data and some insights that even the Walter Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs did not bring up, strangely. So I'm trying to correct the record about Steve Jobs in this book. Steve Jobs did not say to go and develop things full-blown out of your own mind using fake imaginary people as your guide. Steve Jobs never did that, and he never stood for that. To the extent that people want to be like Steve Jobs, and I would say that in recent years, Apple is severely tarnished in its integrity and its brand, but that aside, 10, 15 years ago, that era of Apple, led by Steve Jobs, to the extent you want to be anything like that, involve the customers early, not late, and not never, which is what most product teams do. I think what I'll do is I'll finish with one story from the book. So far I've gone, about 10 minutes, and I haven't told you a single story from the book. This is probably my favorite story. This is the beginning of chapter 2. It's a brief story, but I think it highlights everything that I have been telling you, and everything. We'll open it up to questions after this. Will inform my answers to whatever questions come up. One of my favorite all-time stories in 24 years of consulting at Creative Good. And it has to do with clean drinking water in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a project from now 10 or maybe 14, almost 15 years ago. So in the early 2000s, there was a nonprofit set up to address the problem of remote villages in Sub-Saharan Africa that do not have enough access to clean drinking water. Well, they have clean drinking water, but the women and often the girls of the village have to go to a hand pump in the middle of the village and laboriously pump out the water they need from a borehole, an underground water source. The water comes through the pump and into their bucket, which they then use for cooking and cleaning and so on. And sometimes when there's not enough water, they may have to walk to the next village, which taxes those water resources, and it takes a long time to walk, and it's, they're carrying heavy buckets of water. So this nonprofit came up with the idea, innovation. They said the life in these villages has a lot of kids running around and mothers doing a lot of this laborious work of using the hand pump to pump the water. What if instead of a hand pump, we could give the village a merry-go-round, one of these things where kids spin, what else are they called? A roundabout, a merry-go-round. Anyway, these things that go around like this, that you see on playgrounds, and attach that to the pump so that in the normal activity of play, the kids rotate the pump and the water pumps out. So mom gets her water without having to pump. So and it's colorful and it's fun, and they put up a demonstration unit somewhere in South Africa, and the Western media just descended on that prototype and took lots of photos of smiling kids spinning around on this brightly colored play pump. It was called the play pump because kids would play and they would pump the water at the same time. So it was called the play pump. And that media coverage led to the play pump being given all sorts of design and innovation awards. The Cooper Hewitt, the Design Museum here in New York City, a part of the Smithsonian, I believe either nominated or gave the play pump a National Design Award. Why? Because it's an innovative solution to a pressing problem in the world. They're using play and design to solve the water crisis. And that's what we're after, isn't it? We're looking for creative, innovative solutions to real world problems. So they got a lot of media coverage. They got lots of design awards. I think Fast Company gave them some sort of superlative treatment about design and innovation. And they got a bunch of donations from politicians and media celebrities. I think Jay-Z pitched in a bunch of money. They had a huge amount of press and money and political goodwill behind them, and design awards to boot. And you can guess what happened to the play pump. It was a complete, and I mean complete, failure. It totally failed. And in fact, it might have actually done a good deal more harm than any good that it may have temporarily brought about. It was a terrible project. Now, that may seem a little shocking to us who just a minute ago were thinking, yay, innovation, design, play, design awards, solving tough problems, yay, we're so smart. At least that's what the Western media, the design media, were saying. We're so smart, we're so great, innovation and design will save the world. And they didn't know they were dumping a terribly harmful tool on completely innocent villages in Sub-Saharan Africa that did not ask to have one more problem in their lives. So here's what would happen in these normal day-to-day lives of these villagers. I told you there are a lot of kids, and the women and girls would do the water. Why the men wouldn't pick up the water is a completely different issue. I'm just reporting on how life works normally on a day-to-day basis in many of these villages. And I did do a bunch of research on Sub-Saharan African rural water management, and I can give you some sources if you're interested to delve in further. And it had nothing to do with design awards. These are very dry texts, so to speak. Anyway, so what happened in the normal life of these villages? Mom is pumping the water at the village pump in the center of the village, the hand pump. Kids are running around, playing hide and seek, whatever they're playing. Kids, they have their games that kids all over the world play. And one day, about 15 years ago, a Jeep rolled into town full of strange men no one had ever seen. The men pop out of the Jeep carrying heavy metal hand tools and some sort of mechanical parts. And they go up to the hand pump in the middle of the village, and they rip it out of the ground. And they throw it aside. And then they start installing a new piece of equipment. It's a merry-go-round. So now instead of a hand pump on which the life of the village depends, these men in the Jeep have now installed a merry-go-round. And everybody gathers from the village. The elders come, men and women, and they ask, "What in the world are you doing?" And the men in the Jeep say, "We don't know. Some rich Westerners wanted you to have this, and so here you go." They packed up their tools and they drove off. And now the people in the village look at each other and they say, "This is absurd. We've had a hand pump, a functioning hand pump that we have replacement parts for, we have the training for, we have the community knowledge of how to manage our own water management with this tool, and now it's gone and it's replaced by this foreign object. Kids are this is a playground now?" And now, so the kids, maybe they run around on it a few times, but do you know how long they would have to run the play pump in order to deliver the same amount of water the hand pump did? The kids, one study said the kids would have to be playing with this play pump 26 hours a day in order to deliver the same amount of water that the hand pump did, because it was horribly inefficient. And by the way, and my wife and I have one son. He's no longer small, but he was small once, and I remember him on a merry-go-round. And maybe you have kids, or you've seen kids, or you have nieces, nephews. How long do you think a 6-year-old kid can go on a merry-go-round before they're ready to, vomit on the design award-winning innovation? Which is probably the right response, frankly. So and actually there was a neutral, someone says a few minutes. Yes, you're right. There was a Swiss research group came down to, I believe it was Mozambique. The government of Mozambique started seeing some problems. And so they contracted with some researchers from Europe to come down. Why it was Switzerland, why it had to be Europeans coming down to study this, I don't know. I'm just reporting. So the Swiss came down and delivered a report, and I bring this up because the PDF is still online. At least it was last time I looked, and the link is in the endnotes of my book, Customers Included. And what the report found is that exactly that. The kids were trying to play for a little bit, but then they would get dizzy and nauseous, and so they would stop. And so when the kids, this is documented reality, on-the-ground reality. And so what happened after the kids stopped playing with the play pump is that, guess what? The village still needed water people still needed water to drink, to do laundry and to cook with. So who do you think started spinning the pump then? It was Mom. So instead of using a hand pump like all of her friends and neighbors in the other villages, Mom then had to do the slightly absurd thing of turning the play pump by herself. And because it was so grossly inefficient compared to the hand pump, the line was a lot slower. And then things got even worse, and I'm about to wrap up the story soon. But things got even worse because at some point, this unproven technology, this unproven, untested mechanical device, you'll never guess what happens when you take an unproven, untested mechanical device and put it in a context outside of that in which it was designed. It broke. Of course, the play pump broke. And when it broke, the village had no water because they were not given any training, they were not given any replacement parts, and there was no communication with Play Pump Central to put in a service ticket. Excuse me, our pump is broken. Would you mind having a technician here within the next 6 hours? No, they're totally ignored. But that was just consistent. The people in the villages were ignored in the design process, they were ignored in the rollout, and then they were ignored in the inevitable breakdown in non-existent service. They were ignored, ignored, and ignored. And if that sounds familiar, that's because that's exactly how most product teams operate with their users today. It's not just in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's everywhere. When we build a piece of technology, we tend to imagine imaginary things. We build the tool or the platform or the app based on that, and then we launch it, and then we say, hey, users, what do you think? And then we're just astonished that so many tools and apps fail. Oh my gosh. And I have a whole rogues gallery of press clippings from years now, over several years, of companies, for-profit companies, nonprofit organizations, academia, healthcare, you name it. Teams of all shapes, sizes, and domains all launching something, failing, and then the leader, the product manager or the VP or whoever, when they get interviewed about the blow-up in the press, they say, in hindsight, we probably should have asked our users ahead of time if this was going to be something useful. Oh. And I always go, well, I wrote the book several years ago and you didn't read it, did you? And by the way, I'm going to put in a better, thank you, Katina, for putting in the link. That is a link to the first edition book. We want to make sure to get the second edition book. And the very best way to get the second edition book is to go to customersincluded.com. Customersincluded.com, and that is bypassing Amazon. I think there are some used copies of the second edition online, and you definitely want to get the second edition because the second edition has stories and case studies that first edition one does not have. So get the second edition if you're going to get it, and it bypasses Amazon because I don't sell on Amazon. I try to avoid all connection with Amazon. That's a whole other story that's out of scope. So anyway, let's review and then let's go to Q&A. My one takeaway that I hope you will leave, agree or disagree, I hope you will at least remember this is what I was trying to get at in this session, is that if you want to pursue co-design, if you want to pursue participatory design, the question is not what method do we use, which set of steps and ideation workshops should we use. That's not the question. The question is, do you actually involve customers in any significant way before you begin putting together design? Because most teams do not. So involve the customer early, not late, and not never, which is what most product teams do. And my book, Customers Included, second edition, which looks like this. It has the blue blaze on the top, has a bunch of stories. And if you want to reach out directly to me, I'm at mark@creativegood.com. In my podcast, which is about related topics, as Katina mentioned, is at techtonic.fm, T-E-C-H tonic.fm. I'll put up those links in the chat. But look, that's enough of me just gabbing on and on and on. Why don't we take some questions? See, what are you interested in?